So when we sit down at this stream, we come in about an hour late. When I got to the room, ready to join the stream, the table was already full. I was a little late, so I understand, but the table was full. I had to wait for somebody to bust out. So once he busted out, we got to join the table, and we sat down right into the big blind. The first hand wasn't that great. We went ahead and let it go, but this is our second hand, and we're in the small blind position with a straddle for 15. This is 5-5, so I do have $5 in there already. I look down at ace 4 of diamonds suited and decide I could raise it up here, but being in such early position, the first one to act, um, because of the straddle, and then will be the first one to act because I am in the small blind. I just elect to go ahead and make the call for 15. It folds to the hijack position, who decides that $15 is not enough for him, decides that he wants to go ahead and bump it up to around $90. So it folds back to the button folds, it folds all the way back to me. And with this just being my second hand of the night, I have played against Super Donkey, aka Tommy, before. I do know that he is quite an aggressive player, but with this just being my second hand sitting down at the table, I do feel like that I could pick a better spot to decide to go ahead and make this call or even a raise. Just with it being so early at the table, I decided that I'm gonna go ahead and slow it down a little bit and let this hand go and live to see another day and see if we can do better on in the future. All right, so no sooner than the very next hand, we look back down at ace 4 suited once again, and thinking about the last hand, I kind of feel like I relinquished that hand a little too soon. But with him 3-betting me, I just wasn't willing to risk it all on my second hand at the table. And I know that Tommy could be an aggressive player, and he would be willing to shove or bump it up even more. And with my chip stack just being around like 420 at that time, I noticed I wasn't willing to get it in at that moment. But like I said, the next hand we look down at ace 4 suited again, and we're on the button this time. The small blind and big blind are both posted. It folds around to the villain from last hand, and he decides $5 is good enough for him. So he goes ahead, he makes the call for $5. It folds back to the cutoff position, and the cutoff position decides that he wants to go for $30. So he goes ahead and he throws in one green, one red chip, makes it up to 30. And like I said earlier, with me relinquishing the last ace 4 suited so quickly, I wanted to see what I can develop on this hand. So I definitely, being in position, I definitely decided to go ahead and make that call for $30, and the villain from last hand decides that $30 is a good price for him, and he decides to make that call also. We go to a flop. Flop comes 7-6-3 with 2 spades, and the middle position decides to go ahead and check that. The cutoff decides to continuation bet, and he throws in $60. With me picking up a gut shot straight draw and a backdoor nut flush draw, I decided that $60 was still a good price for me to stick around. I go ahead and toss in my 2 greens, 2 reds, and the middle position decides that that is too much for him, and he goes ahead and he lays his card down. We go to a turn card. That turn card is the 6 of diamonds, so it does pair the board. The board is now 7-6-6-3 with 2 spades, and with the 6 on the board, Hollywood Mike decides to continue telling his story that he has a strong hand. And he decides that betting 135 would be good. So he go ahead and he tosses in 135. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at the board and I'm thinking he raised pre-flop. He either has an overpair or he could be on a flush draw. I doubt that he connected with the board with it being so low. 7-6-3, 2 sixes, board paired. I don't think he connected with the board. I do feel that if I hit my straight, that I still would be good, and possibly ace high is still good at this moment. So with that being said, I'd elect to go ahead and call that 135, and we go to a river card. And the river card comes a 9 of diamonds. So we do have a board of 7 of spades, 6 of clubs, 6 of heart, 9 of diamond, and a 3 of spade. So the spade draw did miss. The front door spade draw did miss. The 9 brings in 8-5 and 8-10. Don't see him making a 3-bet with that pre-flop. Possibly 8-10 suited if he was gonna make a 3-bet with that. But to continue firing on a gut shot, I don't think um, that he's the type of player to do that. I have played with Hollywood Mike quite a few times, and I just don't feel like he's the player to do that. So when we get to that river card, he decides to check, and with me completely missing the board, having just ace high, I do feel like, again, ace high could be good in this position. I don't want to go out and lead into him and he somehow has a magical 6 in his hand or even a better ace. So when he checks it, I snap check it back. I let him know I have ace high, and he flips over and shows us king high. Our ace high is good for the scooping, and we go ahead and we take that pot. Next hand that we're getting into here, we are in the under the gun +1 position. We look down at ace jack off suit. There's a $15 straddle on the button. The small blind elects to go ahead and complete the 15, and it folds to me. Me looking down at ace jack under the gun +1, I decided that I will go ahead and bump it up. I raise it up to $70. It folds to the hijack, and the hijack decides that $70 is not enough for him. He looks down, and whatever hand he has, he decides that he likes it a lot. He shoves over top of me for about $325 effective, and with that shove, it folds all the way back around to me. I'm looking down at my hand and I'm thinking about it. Ace jack off suit. The one variable that played a lot into me folding this right now is Boston. I have never played with him before. I have no read on how he plays or what hands or his range as far as shoving is. And I do feel like that if with him doing this so soon, I believe I was at the table, maybe not even a whole round of the button going around. So I feel like that if he is the type of player to do this with 2 random cards, that I will have a better position to find out and hopefully stack him then. So with that being said, I go ahead and I let the ace 7 go, and possibly I should have made the call. I just didn't want to risk another $255 against a person that I don't know their range of shoving. And I just felt like I needed a little more information before I could start making these calls. So I went ahead and let this one go, and hopefully later on we can get them. All right, so here in middle position, we look down at Queen 10 offsuit, and there is a $15 straddle on the button. And from there, it folds all the way around to me. Me looking down at Queen 10, I decide $15 is still a good price for me to go along. I decide to make the call. It folds to the button, and the button is actually our villain from last hand, Boston. So with that being said, he decides to bump it up to $65, put $50 on top. And by this time, I have seen him play very aggressive quite a few times, and with both great hands and not so great hands. So I feel like my Queen 10 is good enough for me to come along with him. I decide to make the call. We go to a flop. 5-7 ace with 2 diamonds. So with this flop, I decided to go ahead and check it to the pre-flop aggressor, and he seems very uninterested in the hand. He's watching, I believe we had on the football game. He's watching the football game, acts as if he doesn't even notice it's his turn until the dealer gets his attention. He snaps back into it and he throws out a bet, I believe is $50. And with that, a lot of times it can be a tell where people act uninterested in the hand. They usually have a decent hand, flop the decent hand, or somewhere around that nature. And sometimes people appear to be strong. They aren't when they're staring you down. Things like that. They tend typically a lot of times they aren't strong, and then a lot of times when they appear uninterested in the hand, they typically are strong and they're trying to put off the presentation that they don't care where they're at and that the hand doesn't matter. They're not that good in the hand. You know what I'm saying? So I decided to take my read on that and to see where I was. So I decided to bump it up to, I believe, 125. And with that being bumped up to 125, Boston decides to make the call. And then we go to a turn card, which is three of hearts. The three of hearts comes out on the turn, and like I said, from the tell that I was getting, he seemed uninterested in the hand, which a lot of times tends to be a strong hand, at least top pair. So with ace being out there, I'm starting to believe that he does have an ace. And I told you by this time I've seen him be very aggressive with not so great hands. A lot of times it did. Well, I'm not gonna say a lot of times, but it has been working out for him. As y'all can see, his chip stack has went up from around $325 to a little over 1,000. So his aggressive play has been working out for him. The cards has been going in his favor in these recent hands. So when he decided to make that smooth call back on my re-raise on the flop with the three coming out, doesn't change much on the board, but I still believe that he has a pretty strong hand. So I decide to check. He decides to check it back. And then we go to a river card, which is the Queen of Diamond. And yes, that does give me my top pair in my hand, but it's still second pair on the board. Also gives me a lot of showdown value. So with that being said, I go ahead and I check this. He checks it back. And we go to the showdown. He shows that he has an ace. The pot goes his way. All right, so sitting there in the cutoff position, we look down at a premium hand, which is Ace King of Diamonds suited. And there's a $10 straddle on the button. The small blind, big blind, they both fold. It folds all the way around to the hijack position. The hijack position looks down at his hand and decides with a straddle for $10 that is just not enough. He decides to bump it up to $30. And like I said, I played against this player before. And if he has a nice hand, he will come along with me. It doesn't have to be a hand that is necessarily better than the one that I have now, but if he does have a nice hand, he will come along with me. So me not wanting to be out of position to the button, I do elect to go ahead and bump it up to $80 in the cutoff position. The button looks at his hand, thinks about it, and folds. It gets back around to the hijack position, who sits there and he tries to get information out of me. He talks to me. He asks me questions. He's trying to put me on a hand, and I guess with him unable to put me on a hand, he decides that $80 is not enough. He go ahead and he folds, and we scoop that dead money. The dead money is good enough for us. Next hand we're looking at here, we are in the under the gun +1 position. We look down at ace 9 offsuit. There's a $15 straddle on the button. The small blind elects to make the call. The big blind folds. The under the gun position makes the call. I make the call for 15. It folds back around to the button, and the button decides to check his option. So we are going to a flop. Ace King 7 rainbow board, and with that the small blind checks, the under the gun checks, and it checks all the way around. We go to a turn card, which is the Queen of Heart. When the Queen of Heart comes, the small blind position elects to bet $35. And when the small blind makes the bet of $35, the under the gun position elects to make a smooth call. And at this point, I do think that I made a mistake with this hand, with me underplaying my top pair, just checking the flop straight through. I do believe that I could have and should have repopped the pot here. I should have made a decent size raise and forced any heart draws or any straight draws that were drawing out on that board into a little pressure, put a little pressure on them and see how they responded. But I did not elect to go ahead and raise here. I did decide just to make the smooth call, knowing that I do have an ace, and my kicker is not that great, a middling kicker. I could be out kicked. I don't see anyone having two pair here. Ace king, ace queen, possibly king queen. I could see a jack 10, but just with no raises pre-flop, I don't see anyone having ace king or ace queen here. I do think that I could possibly still be good here, but I am playing a little cautious. I should have put a little bit more aggression behind this play, and I do think that we could have took the pot down right here, but no, we elect to just make the $35 call, and we go to a turn card. And that turn card is a 4 of club. So with the 4 of clubs coming out, doesn't really change much on the board in my eyes. But the small blind, he elects to just check it. And when it gets to the under the gun position, he decides to throw out a bet of $75, 3 green chips. Looking down at our hand and the run out of the board, I do believe that I could just be donating chips here to a straight or to a king queen 2 pair. But I do feel like that the way this hand was played, the way I under-repped my hand, that it is just too strong to fold for a $75 bet. So I do elect to make the $75 call, and we are shown the bad news of our villain having ace 4 offsuit for the river 2 pair. That damn river monster. Next hand, we're going over here. We are in the hijack position. We look down at 8-7 suited, and this is another hand that if we can see a flop for $15, we think that's a great price. We're going to have to go along, so we go ahead and we make that call for 15, and the hijack makes the call, the cutoff makes the call, and the button decides to check his option. We go to a flop. Ace Jack 7 with 2 hearts. And with that, it checks to the middle position, who decide that that flop was great for him. He bets out $75 into a 6-way pot. And surprisingly, he gets not one caller. He goes ahead and he scoops down that pot. Nothing we can do with 8-7 suited here. Bottom pair, no back doors. We just decide to let it go. He takes that one down. So I'm sitting in the big blind position. I look down at ace deuce offsuit. The under the gun folds, under the gun +1 folds, under the gun +2 decides that $5 is good enough for him to come along. He makes the call for $5. It folds to the hijack position. The hijack position says his hand is good enough to make it more. So he goes ahead and he bumps it up to $20. It folds back to me, looking down at ace deuce offsuit in the big blind. With the specific 2 players that I have, I could make this fold here, but I do know both aggressive players that are in this pot are extremely aggressive at times. I go ahead and I make the call for 20. It gets over to Boston, who is in the under the gun +2 position. And as we've seen multiple times this night, he has decided to short stack shove on us again.
Boston shipping it again.
Effective $310, and it gets back over to Super Donkey in the hijack position. He decides that $310 without Boston be able to do any more extra damage, and having us covered already, he was good to go in, so he made that call for $310. It gets back over to us, and once again, with the 2 players in this pot, with me also being short stacked, I decided that making this call was a good play. I was a good spot to make this call, so I went ahead and made that call. Put me all in, and we go to a flop. We win with trip aces for a full triple up, and the cutoff position shows down king 9 to win the side pot. We love to see those aces on that flop. So the next hand that we're looking at here, we're looking down at ace queen offsuit in the cutoff position, and there's a $15 button straddle. It folds around to the under the gun plus one position, who decides to make a call, and from him it folds around to me in the cutoff. Looking down at ace queen in the cutoff position, I do elect to raise it up to $60, so I go ahead and then toss in $60. The button decides that he's going to defend his straddle, and he comes along for $60 also. And the under the gun plus one position decides that $60 is just a little too steep for him to come along to see a flop. He lets his hand go, and we go to a flop of 754 rainbow. And I could continuation bet here, as if I have an overpair or something like that, but I do realize that with the button defending his straddle, that these cards hit his range a lot more than it does hitting my raising range on the flop, pre-flop. So we do elect to check over to the button, and the button seems like he might like this board a little bit. He elects to bet out $55. And with me having two overs, ace queen, I do feel like that I could possibly still be good if I peel ace or a queen. So with that being said, I do elect to go ahead and make this call here, and we go to a turn card. 9 of heart. And we check our option over to the button, hoping that he checks it through and gives us a free river card. But we are thinking to ourselves, if we check it, we can check jam here. If he makes a bet, we can go ahead and shove it over top, put him in a tough position, and see what he's willing to do. And he decides that he's not giving us a free river card. He decides to put out 115. It's back on us, and our fingers on the trigger. We were waiting to pull it, and we freeze up. We just can't do it. We just can't do it. We start to think, and we're like, well, maybe if we just make a call here, we can jam on any 3, any 6, any 8, or any 10, possibly any heart. Put him in a really tough position. So we just elect to go ahead and make the call for 115. We go to a river card, which pairs the board. Top pair, runner, nines. We do decide to check our option. We gave up on this hand. Then it gets over to the button, and the graphics are slightly off. We are sitting over there with about 265, and I noticed that the button puts a bet in for about 275. So basically puts us in all in effective.
It's going to be a one-day event. I don't think that's 2 days. I'm going to go check Poker Atlas right now.
Something that was off for me. I've played with this guy quite a few times, and some reason it just seemed like he was.
Again, if you guys want more information on
tends to play pretty straightforward, pretty solid game, but it just seemed like he was targeting my stack instead of playing his hand.
Let's go check.
Once I look back at it, I realized that
be a one day.
This could be a really terrible call, but with just another live read that I've been trying to work on a little bit, not too great at it, still working, but have played with this guy several times before. Just noticed that it just felt like he was targeting my stack more than he was playing his cards. So with that, I decided to make the call all in, and I announced to him that I have ace high.
But as far as I know,
and our ace high is golden. We get a full double up here with ace queen offsuit, ace high for the winner. Next hand that we're going to be going over here, I am in the big blind. There's a $15 straddle on the button, and the small blind immediately bumps it up to $30. I look down at ace 9 offsuit. I oblige and say $30 is good enough for me to come along. It folds along to the middle position. The middle position decides that $30 is not quite enough for him. He decides to min raise up to $60. It folds back to the small blind. The small blind says, hey, I'm coming to play too. So he throws in 30. and brings me along. I throw in 32. We go to a flop. Perfect flop for me. Something that I love to see. Come out 997. Me hitting trips and the small blind checks. I can't bet out here. No way I can lead bet. So I decide to check my option over to the pre-flop aggressor, and the pre-flop aggressor decides that he's going to c-bet for $100. He throws out $100 and the small blind folds. I decide, way too strong right here to check raise. I'm just gonna come along. I throw in my $100 and we go to a turn card. That turn card comes out the 10 of hearts, which now brings in the 8-6 straight and the 8 jack straight. And it also brings in a backdoor heart draw to the heart flush draw. So with that being said, we decide to go ahead and check it out and see if we can get him to fire out again. The pot is around $400, $395, I believe, to be exact at this moment. We check our option and he decides to continue betting again. He fires into us one more time for $250. Now, with it coming back to us, I'm looking at the board. I see that the straight draw has got there for 8-6 and for jack 8. I do realize that if he does have an 8 here, he's probably not gonna fold. Possible heart draw, not gonna fold. And if he is on a draw and he completely bricks his river card, I can't see me getting any more value out of him from any other draws that are bricked on the river. So with all of that going through my mind, I decide, you know what? He's already in for 250. He has about 500 back. The pot is about $650. Yeah, between $650, $700. I go ahead and effectively shove for around $750. I believe he slightly has me covered by maybe $10, $20, maybe. He thinks about it for a while. He asks for a chip stack count. They count my chips up for him. He decides that his hand is no good. He decides to throw it down, and we scoop that one up for a nice gain. So the last hand that we're gonna look at here is literally the last hand of the stream for the night. And I wake up with ace-9 suited in the under the gun +1 position. So I go ahead and I bump it up to 25 to go. It folds around all the way to the cutoff position. The cutoff decides that $25 is a good enough price for him. He decides to make the call. The button folds. The small blind makes the call and the big blind makes the call. We go to a flop of jack 10-4 with 2 diamonds. And as I expected, me being a pre-flop aggressor, it checks over to me with me flopping the nut flush draw. I do feel like continue betting here is a great spot. So I do decide to make a bet of $60, knowing that if I hit another diamond, I will have the nuts here as long as the board is not paired. So I do elect to make a bet of $60. The cutoff position folds. The small blind decides that $60 is just quite not enough for him. So he decides to 3-bet me up to $175. And the big blind folds, and when it's back on me, I don't elect to re-raise just in case he is bluffing. I want to keep his bluffs in, and I don't have a made hand yet. So I could re-raise it, but I do feel like right here in this situation, it's best to go ahead and just make a flat call, get to see the next card, and decide on our options from there. So I do make the call for an additional 115, a total of 175. We go to a turn card, and immediately we get what we want. We didn't have to wait for it, didn't have to sweat it out, didn't have to guess if it was coming. Right on the turn, we get the 3 of diamond, giving us the nut flush draw. I'm sorry, giving us the nut flush. So with that being said, I do feel like go ahead and continue betting here would be quite a position. So I do elect to throw in a bet.
So after it's checked over to me, I do elect to make a bet for about 1/3 the size of the pot. The pot is around $450. I do make a bet for about $150, knowing that I do have the nuts at the moment. So I go ahead and I make my bet for 150, and the small blind decides that 150 is still a good enough price for him to go and stay. So he decides to go ahead and make the call for 150. So we go to a river card, which pairs the board. Another three of clubs comes out on the river. Not too worried about a random three. Because of the way that the bets was going, I don't think there's any way that he has a random three here unless he has pocket threes, which if he has pocket threes, no way I can see that anyways. He's gonna take my money. Even if he decides to re-raise, I might still have to make the call. I do realize with the board pairing, if he did have a pair of fours, pair of tens, or any set basically, on the flop or the turn, well, on the flop he made a full house once it got to the river. But me not putting him on any set or anything like that, I do elect to go ahead and bid out for a little less than half pot. I believe the pot was around $750. I decided to throw in $325 to see if we can get a little bit of more value out of our nut flush hand. And Tommy, Super Donkey, takes his time and he starts speaking out loud, trying to figure out my hand, and he actually places me on the exact hand that I have. He says, "Chris, you really like the flushes." Try to keep a stone cold face, not give off any tails. But eventually, he feels his hand is too strong to let go in this position, and he decides to make the call for $325. We go ahead and we show our nut flush straight to the ace, and he shows us top two pair, Jack 10. He flopped two pair. We were able to go ahead and scoop a pot here, biggest pot of the night for us, and we'll catch you next time. It was a great night for us, and hopefully the run good continues. Had a great night tonight. A little bit of run good, great cards, good position, great flops. We had a couple situations where we ran into better hands, but we did get out with the least amount of damage possible in most situations. Great stream for us. In for 420, out for 2210 for a profit of $1,790. Great night for us. Hope the run good continues. Subscribe to the channel. Thank you for tuning in.